Thank you very much for giving this very exceptional honor to me of inaugurating the dialogue, conversation, thinking, introspection, reflection, critiquing the question of knowledge in relation to society and the question of society in relation to knowledge. One may perhaps think that we are just revisiting a debate that took place 200 years ago. In the times of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, when the Bengali intellectuals had started thinking if they should have European knowledge or Indian knowledge to follow. I have no particular view about whether this is a repeat or not. But I have some thoughts. I have no attitude, but some thoughts about this, and let me present those thoughts before you. The question of knowledge needs to be looked at from a variety of perspectives, as Sunilji was saying. Knowledge is not just science, but is also art, and more than that, it's a social practice, it's a cultural given, a cultural legacy, and part of one's life. Indeed, that is so. But let me say that in the history of this cosmos, if cosmos has history, the earth settles down to its present shape some 400 crores ago. But the Homo sapien and the Homo sapiens, other relatives, Neanderthal, Homo erectus, etc., have been around for a short time, very short time. The Homo sapiens' history of thinking cannot be stretched back beyond just 20 lakh years, 2 million years. It is about 2 million years ago that something seems to have happened in the progress of this animal called Homo sapien inside the brain, inside the neurological circuits. And that happening, that event, was the human brain, unlike the brains of other animals, most other animals, I am saying, because there could be exceptions, and I stand, possibly this is a vast generalization, but unlike the brains of most other animals, the human brain is capable not just of thinking, but also capable of thinking about thought. That thinking about thought capability seems to have emerged about 2 million years ago, and that is the first major rebellion, revolt by any creation of nature against nature. In that moment of revolt is the birth of knowledge. I mean, very often we look at mythologies as meaningless stories, but I can refer to the Christian mythology of stealing the fruit of knowledge. You see, beginning of, I'm not saying that that's scientific presentation of our history. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not defending myth as science, and I shall also not defend, attack science as myth. I accept myth for what it is, I accept science for what it is. I accept Western science as cheerfully as I accept traditional Indian knowledges and Indian folk traditions. I mean, in this hall, if I have to be very honest, if I have to be as honest as Gandhi was, I will admit that the fan, the electricity, the tube lights, the beamless roof, the microphone, all have come out of science developed or technology developed in some other places. I don't mind accepting that truthfully. But the question of knowledge needs to be looked at more carefully than just the polemical debate that what we are doing today is looking at that question more carefully in a granular way, unlike the debate at the beginning of the 19th century. And that's very important. Unfortunately, compulsions from regulators in the nation have driven a lots of academics towards a new fashion called Indian knowledge system. I should mention that when the People of India project was done by Kumar K. Singh, he counted something like 4,000 Indian communities. In the last census of India, the mother tongues mentioned, mother tongues recorded, offered by Indian citizens, the number was close to 1369 verified mother tongues. Unverified mother tongues were 19,000 mother tongues. Verified mother tongues were 1369. So if there are about 4,000 communities, if there are 1,400 mother tongues, then there are bound to be so many traditions of knowledge in our country. So Indian knowledge is not a single tradition, nor is European knowledge a single tradition. After all, what happened in Italy as technical and scientific development was not exactly what happened in France, or in Portugal, or in Spain, or in East Europe for that matter. Europe is not a single spot to blame or to praise, nor is India a single spot to be upheld or to be denounced. There is a bit of Europe in us, and there is a lot of India in them. At least from the literary perspective, as poets like W.B., some of your students of literature, W.B. Yeats, T.S. Eliot, they have picked up stories from Upanishad. The question of knowledge today is a universal, a global question, and it is as follows. Knowledge as perception is a gift of the sensory equipment that we have. I touch this or I see that and my brain collects. That's individual perception, cognition. But the moment I speak about it and you hear it and you speak about your perception and I hear it, what I said has disappeared in the air, thin air. My words have gone. But that information between you and me becomes neither your information nor mine, but a third objective, non-personal information that deposit slowly gets handed over from one generation to the next generation and becomes knowledge. Knowledge in that sense. Not knowledge of how hot it is, how cold it is for my skin, or for how sweet or salty it is for my tongue, but for all those who are to come in the following generations. When complexity of this deposit, cultural deposit, increases, methods of remembering are invented. They are called mnemonics. In Marathi, when I had to remember the colors in the names of colors in the spectrum, color spectrum, I used to remember the first letter: Tamda, Nila, Piula, Hirva, Jamla, Tana, Pihi, Nipaza. 7 colors I remember. And every child does it. Not does every child here in India or in Europe, but all generations of all humans have done this to remember things, to simplify. What is your simple arithmetic is method of remembering. Anyway, when complexity of this memory load, so in short, knowledge is the memory collection in a society, and it requires a society. When the burden, the complexity of this memory collection increases, societies create institutions. All museums, all libraries, all universities are an expression of the collected memory of humans. They became necessary. In fact, in Europe, from the same 4th century, 17th, actually going back from 15, 16, 17 centuries, every science, every field of knowledge came up with one particular design of remembering. So we call that taxonomy or classification. Chemistry has one kind of table for remembering all elements. Physics will have different kind of standards and formulas for remembering the same material, not in the same manner but differently. Every geology will have yet another table. So these different matrices, these different tables, these classifications, taxonomies, they started spreading in various directions, and a time came, these taxonomies were taxonomies of symbols. These arrangements were arrangements of symbols, arrangements of abbreviations, arrangements of memory tricks, arrangements of mnemonic arrangements. When these different arrangements in different fields started going in variety of directions, some people in Europe believed that it was necessary to bring them together. And therefore they decided to invent a higher order of classification. And in that direction, several attempts were made in Italy, in France, in Germany. I will turn to India very soon. Finally, a Swiss, French, German fellow, Leibniz, figured out a method of translating all taxonomies into a single classification and back from that single classification to all taxonomies. You think of a librarian's catalog, for instance. That might give you some closest analogy. And he used this string of zeros and ones, 0 and 1, to bring all these together. That method made all that was known in Europe, Chota Europe, Little Europe. At that time, Europe was just a small world. In that little arena of Europe, all that was known could become accessible to anybody who picked up this method. And therefore, that knowledge was called universal knowledge, because learning the method and the place to learn that method was the university. University was not about learning about the universe. No university has done it so far. University in European sense in the 18th and 19th century was about learning a method of getting into any discipline. This is factual, historical, correct history of the idea of university in Europe. Now, what those universities produced, therefore, and mistakenly came to be known as knowledge. The method became the substance, and that's where a lot of problems started. But let's remember that this organizing knowledge was essentially organizing memory. And that brings us to the question of knowledge in India from a very different angle. Thank you. We are people with lots of memory traditions. No, it was a telephone trying to bother me. Thank you. Or you want me to stop? Thank you. We have many memory traditions. There is memory of one kind where there is a written text, but the rendition is oral. Where there is memory tradition, where the tradition is actually taught actively. There are memory traditions where tradition is picked up passively and tacitly by the learner. There are memory traditions which are available or accessible only to a very limited group of people, such as the Mahanubhav people in Maharashtra, for instance. I can give you other examples. There are memory traditions where the lead is coming from ecology, nature, as in the community of Vanagujars in Himalaya, or Dhangars, or the pastoralists. India has as many memory traditions as India has as many as communities and languages in India. So I shall say that India is about, going by K. Singh's number of communities and my understanding of languages in India, India is about 5,000 memory traditions, not a single memory tradition. Now you will find this claim untenable, but I am not placing it before you to provoke you. I am just saying it because numerically this data is with us. Therefore, I am saying it. But I do not want to take any great credit for placing this number before you, because I also feel concerned as to what to do with this memory tradition. How do we bring these memory traditions together? I mean, we do not have a single philosophic tradition. There are philosophies that believe in God, they don't believe in God. There are astikas, there are nastikas, there are so many vadas, darshanas, all that, great diversity. Indian memory tradition is the memory tradition of diversities. That much all of us will accept. Now, the question is not how many knowledges India has. The question is different, and that is, because of the development of technology to which lots of Indians have contributed, it is not as if only Americans or the West are guilty. We are co-conspirators, we are co-criminals in that, or we are co-victors in that, whichever way you look at it. The production of artificial memory, the use of artificial memory, for instance, my mobile was ringing a minute ago. My mobile remembers everybody's numbers. I don't remember, my brain remembers nobody's telephone number. The artificial memory is working for us today. When the artificial memory started affecting human society, culture and memory, natural memory, one philosopher in Canada was asked to produce a report on knowledge. His name was Lyotard, Jean-Jacques Lyotard. He came up with a book called A Report on Knowledge, the postmodern condition. Now don't worry about the term postmodern. It's not about the fashion of postmodernity and all that. I'm least concerned about postmodernity and modernity. I'm talking about real humans in real miserable life situation. In that book, Lyotard says that no longer knowledge will have any steady references. In short, he has given a call for rejecting the Leibniz framework of deciding knowledge. The knowledge universals have been thrown out. Professor Anantmurthy, who is a scholar of physics, will endorse this, that the standards, the universal global standards have been done away with. What is a foot and a centimeter, what is the measure for temperature, I mean, all those so-called, all those, the standards which served humanity very well for a long time, they have been discarded. Exactly at the same time, when scientists came together, when the standards were being moved out of the official housing of the standards, was exactly the moment when scientists from all over the world came together and said that we have crossed the tipping points and we have invited upon ourselves an ecological disaster. Irreversible decline of ecological resources. So many countries have come up with ecological emergency. What I am saying is, the artificial memory replacing most functions of the human brain, including imagination, not just memory. Coleridge could distinguish between memory and imagination. Every MA student used to have an essay. What is the Coleridge's theory of imagination as against memory? And Hobbes had this: memory is great but imagination is bad. Coleridge was saying imagination is good but memory is bad. All of that is old hat. Now the entire world, we are one in the world today. We are not India and England and America. We are one as a species, and we are facing a disaster caused by artificial memory, where human memory is steadily, very rapidly declining, making knowledge as a human property impossible. In other words, the rebellion that humans staged several million years ago is now being put to sleep. That is where we need a way out, and that's where this lokastha vidya comes handy, in my opinion. Let me quickly add, vidya and jnana or jnana, as Hindi speakers say. In Marathi they say jnana, in Hindi they say jnana, in Bangla they say jnana, but Kannada is jnana, jnana, vidya. These are two different matters completely. They sound like synonyms, but let me give you an example. In Greek, there is a word called gnosis, which is a close cousin of jnana. And there is also another term called logos. Gnosis or gnana refers to the process of knowing as a verb. Logos is a body, vidya is a body, it is a noun. The two are different. One is talking about the process, the other is talking about it outside the mind, something out there. So, we have the question of knowledge today and the question of community today, because all humans are in the grip of an extremely sharp economic divide, disparity, inequality. And if there is any inequality, knowledge simply becomes impossible. Its survival becomes impossible. You might produce first-rate knowledge, but if you are an unequal citizen in a country or in the world, your knowledge has no meaning. I mean, this has been the political history of the world. Unprecedented inequality. I remember in the Constituent Assembly debates, Jaipal Singh, one of the very few representatives, tribal representatives, Jaipal Singh, I don't know if young people know, he was our hockey captain. He was a brilliant Oxford graduate who passed ICS, became first hockey. He got the gold medal in hockey for India. A brilliant young man. He was a tribal. He was asked, will tribal join the republic? And his answer was, yes, of course, but only if that is on equal footing. The yes has remained, the equal footings have gone. The tribals, the nomads, they become so marginalized. The small business people have become so marginalized because of economic disparity. People, please do not feel offended. Students going to state universities and students going to private universities, there's disparity. Great, we live in the times of unprecedented inequality. And the question of knowledge acquires a very different dimension. The second is, we live in the times when democracies have collapsed. Like it or not, even if many of us pretend that we are in democracies, all over the world, democracies are a thing of the past. Like it or not. Let's accept it. Buddha said, accepting the problem is the first stage of solving the problem. And this has happened all over, west or east. There is no east or west when it comes to the debacle of democracy. The third is we're gripped by technology, and that's even, the worst of a calamity. We're gripped by technology in such a way that we are not able to find a way out of this. Our kids are not talking to us today. They are looking at their mobiles. Look at them. All the time. Husband is not talking to wife. Wife is not talking to husband. Where is the community? The family has gone. It has gone for a toss. Where is the community? What is folk? It's gone. Reckless individualism and endless consumerism have done away with the notion of a meaningful individual in a family and society. And that's a truth we must accept. And in such a situation, the only way out is to think beyond, not to go back, but to go ahead. Some Australian philosophers have suggested that instead of democracy, we should propose now cosmocracy. That is, a government which will take into account all species, not only human species. It's a new political idea. In that idea, we need to be more sensitive to differences and diversities. Just as today we are more sensitive to gender diversity, language diversity, but to be more sensitive to all kinds of diversities. And in order to be sensitive to diversities, we need to learn from the folks, from the communities. Whether we get knowledge from them, that's different. Plenty of it is there. I spent several decades working on that. And I'm convinced there is a continent to be discovered waiting for us to discover it. But I think what we need to learn from the folk is the politics of diversity. And India has a good chance of doing it because we are the most populous country. We are also only one country in the world which is growing older. That is older. Look at yesterday's Hindu, the middle page article. We are growing. Our old population is growing larger without the young population getting rich. This has never happened with any other country. A country getting old without getting rich is a unique. I think it can lay a foundation for a different kind of future politics. I'm not promoting poverty. Deprivation and want are terrible. They must be fought. I'm only describing reality as it is. The question of knowledge for us today needs to be seen through the spectrum of technology in global terms, inequality in global terms, political upset in global terms, in such a way that some of us what was our indigenous can be reused or reused in such a way as some of which was individual with us, indigenous with us, but in synthesis with some other tradition has blossomed into some new directions. That also we must make ours. Ramanujan had that wonderful poem, whatever comes to this house is mine. The sense of the self to be made most generous could be the way ahead for looking at the question of knowledge and decide which is our knowledge. In the field of knowledge, there is nothing like our knowledge or their knowledge. Knowledge is good. Politics can use knowledge to dominate people and call that domination civilization. That needs to be fought. Knowledge knows no competition. Knowledge only knows liberty, liberation, freedom. Sa vidya ya vimukta. Thank you so much.